Thank you, Prof. Good evening, everybody. I hope you hear me well because somebody responded earlier. I hope you coping with the cold weather. We in June, so yeah, it's normal. Right, let's get to the topic of the day. So we're going to talk about conducting a literature review for your research. So I'm going to just talk a bit about the overview of a literature review, or even looking at maybe some details. So it's not going to be long. I think we'll be done within an hour because I believe most of you have had experience with research, especially the doctoral students. The master's student, maybe if you did a project during the how do you call that program, the postgraduate, if you went through that road, or maybe if you come straight from maybe your honors, then maybe you did not. But I'm sure we have an idea of what is going on. So first, I want to start by saying a literature review is not a collection of citations. We have seen so many times, we were there as well before, where you see people write paragraphs and paragraphs is just citations. And so often, actually, there are not even those academic expressions or transition words or phrases that people use. So they just say, according to this one, and then after that, another citation at the end with the source, and sometimes there is even no source. So this is not what a literature review is. Yes, these sources are actually at the core of a literature review, but you need to do something yourself as well. So when you read and you write, you need to have your input in there as well. So what do you think of what has been written, or what has been found, or what has been discussed by those authors? So you need to do an interpretation as well. You need to do an evaluation. You need to do an assessment of all of that. So it's included as part of your literature review, so that your readers actually understand and have the feeling that even yourself, actually, you understood what was happening. So that is one thing. Now, there is also, we have seen so many statements that are not sourced. So some of the statements definitely have been taken from somewhere, but they have not been sourced. So these, again, remember about the plagiarism that we're going to subject your proposal to. And if you say something that other people said and you don't acknowledge that, so that is going to increase the similarity rate of your proposal. So you need to take this into account. And then you also need to learn actually how to cite when you do it. So long citations, for example, there is a way to cite them. Instead of writing a long paragraph and then at the end you put a citation, a source, or at the beginning. So there are ways to cite, long citation that you also need to learn. So this is something else. And then we also seen, those small paragraphs, especially at the master's level. I don't know why they liked that a lot. 3-4 lines paragraph with one source at the end. So try to avoid those as well. Have a paragraph of at least 8 to 10 lines with 2-3 sources in there. Okay. Then we have seen also the confusion between the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework. So these are two things that are linked, but they're not the same. So especially for PhD students, you need to have these actually very clear and distinct in your proposal and eventually in your literature review chapter later on. Okay, so we're going to look at the details of these. We have seen people who do not introduce the topic or the heading. So they just start writing, I mean, not introduce, but define the definition of the concept in your subheading. Let's say in the literature review, you write data collection, for example. You just start saying questionnaire is this way to do data collection. So what is data collection first? So you need to give a definition before you start getting into the detail in different sections. Then something just slipped out of my mind, but okay, we will come definitely back to that. Just trying to see. Okay, so people do not do an introduction as well. We've seen, for example, or a conclusion. So remember, I did a French system. So we start learning about writing, probably I think in grade 4 or 5. So we know that there is an introduction, there is a body, and there is a conclusion. So you find that people do not conclude, for example, their section. Let's say you have the literature review in your whole entire proposal, but then at the end of the first section, before you move to, for example, to the literature review or to the research methodology, there is no conclusion, or they don't announce what is coming next. So these are also important to have your writing coherent and presentable. Okay. Now, when we come down to the substance itself. Okay, let me see if I can share this. Yeah. Do you see what I'm sharing? Somebody can somebody?
Yes, we can.
Confirm. Okay.
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay. So as I was just mentioning about introduction, body, and conclusion. So every chapter that you start need to start with the introduction and the background. Now, in your literature review, what needs to go there? So again, what I want to say here is this is not a rigid sort of guideline. So it is like flexible. You can adapt it to your own study. Some of the things you may ignore, some of the things you can use and you can add as well. So it is not something that is exhaustive as such. So we're just giving you an overview, especially those who are doing masters, because remember, here what you have is It's not a lot of pages as your literature review. Later on, you're going to have an entire chapter for your literature review. Okay, so you need to start by briefly introducing your research field and the topic with its context. So this is what slipped out of my mind earlier, the context. We remember during the induction, we had one of our colleagues who talked about the importance of the context, and you will see, we'll come back to it in almost every page we go through here. So context is extremely important. You have studies that have been carried out 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that are still being cited and the concept are still being used. But times have evolved and things have changed. So something that has been working or that worked 50 years ago may not work in this context. It doesn't mean that actually it is obsolete or it is no longer valid. So it was valid then, it can be adapted to our times. So it's extremely important to have that in mind all the time. Now, you need to define your literature review and its purpose. I just mentioned again about people not defining. So you just start and then we don't know what literature review is. So you just start telling us things. So this is something that you need to avoid. Now, you need to establish the scope and limitation of your research. So that again goes back to the context, because that will set the context of your study for future researchers who are going to refer to it to use as well. Now, what are the key debates? The gaps in the existing literature. And remember, that is what is going to justify your proposed research. So you look at the literature and you found some gap that you want to fill in. Obviously, you're not going to fill the entire gap. You're going to fill part of it. And other researchers will carry on with that later on as well. We always need to remember that research is never final. So people will work on it and will come and maybe criticize it and add something. So we keep that in mind as well all the time. So you may also want to define your literature search method, what type of databases you look at, the period you covered. That is important. Again, it goes back to context. So what period are you looking at? Is it 50 years ago? Is it a certain period of 10 years, 20 years between a year and another? So to set that, context time in your study, and what type of sources as well that you look at. It could be generally for dissertation and thesis, you're going to look a lot at university repositories, obviously with other things as well. So the online searches are very, very helpful these days, not like long ago. And then, yes, books I still look at as well. Now, let's move to those two concepts I mentioned earlier, the theoretical and the conceptual framework. Please, even though we're going to have a Q&A at the end, but you can stop me anytime to say something if you wish. I was just saying that now research is never final, but knowledge either. So it's we all learning. So there are people who could have something, pertinent or relevant to say or to add, or if you have a question as well there, so you can intervene. Unfortunately, I can't see the hands when I'm presenting, I'm sharing. So you probably just need to unmute and say something, then I will stop. Okay. So back
Doctor,
to
sorry, Doctor.
yes.
Yeah, I will
Yes.
also. I can see. So, if I'll also just bring it to your attention if someone has raised their hand, so I can see on your behalf.
Okay, actually, I even saw your hand, so I think maybe sometimes I can see, but if I don't, then you can let me know. All right, so back to the two concepts. Now, so you have your theoretical and your conceptual framework. Generally, you need to start with the theoretical framework because remember you are writing a literature review, so you're going to read through a lot of theories and models in your field and in your topic. So, and generally, your theoretical framework is going to help you with your conceptual framework. So it's always good to start with the theoretical framework. So you look at the main theories and models relevant to your field and maybe to your topic that you are dealing with. Then you also look at the theoretical lenses or eyes for your research. So among these theories, what are you going to base your own research on? What is going to be, as said here, the lenses through which your research will be seen? So that is why, again, it is important to start with your theoretical framework because you're going to build your conceptual framework later on based on those that you have chosen to be the lenses for your research. Now, you also need to highlight or outline or point out who are the main contributors in or authors in those theories or concept or that field and what their contributions are. Now, when you move to your conceptual framework, then you're going to look at the various concepts from those theories that you have read through and find what are the relationships. You also need to connect your research to these concepts and see how they can align to help you with building your own theoretical framework. Then you're going to develop your own conceptual framework accordingly. So that is going to be a little later. So after you've done the rest of the reading, the writing of the review, then you will come down to building your conceptual framework that we're going to see an example of later on. Okay, so now what is going to be in all of those theories and concepts that you have been looking? So this is where your empirical review comes in. So it's not like a section or a part on its own. So it's something that is going to be integrated into your when you are doing your theoretical framework, especially, and you are writing in general. So don't think of like it's something you're going to have as a let's say a heading for or in your chapter. So how has research on the topic evolved over time? So again, remember we talk about the context. So let's say you are doing something in entrepreneurship, and then we always talk about Schumpeter. So, and I think he did his writing and all his work in the probably 30s, 40s, and maybe 50s. And now the concept has evolved over time, but it's still used. So you need to look at from him through passing through other researchers in the 60s, in the 70s, till now, what has changed. what are the milestone and paradigm shift? So coming back to the same thing. So what has changed? Sometimes people find some concept no longer relevant at this time. So you need to point those one out. Now, what have they replaced those concepts with? And how is it being researched or being talked to or being discussed now? Then very important is the organization of themes within your literature review. So just yesterday, actually, I was looking at a literature review chapter of one of our students. You find in a paragraph, somebody start with something and then jump to another thing and then goes back to that same theme or topic again later on. So this is not organized. So organize your writing by themes in each section and then have each theme discussed in a paragraph. Again, remember not those short 3-4 paragraphs because you're not going to discuss an entire theme within that. Some themes that are maybe important may even have more than 2 paragraphs. So, but then have something that is talking to the same thing in the same paragraph, not starting to talk about survey and then suddenly it's disappear and then you're talking about something else and then later on we see that you're coming back to the definition of survey and again. So this is a good way to organize your literature review. So then, as I just mentioned, then you need to discuss your theme according to the major research topics, key findings, method, approaches, and limitation. So again, you organize that, everything you do in different themes. And as I said, so if in a theme, you may need to have to talk about findings, methods, and limitations as well, then it may have 2 paragraphs, for example. In the first one, you can talk about the topic itself, and then in the second paragraph, you can talk about the rest of the things. But then, still related to that, not jump into anything else before you start a new paragraph. Now, remember when I was giving the overview, I mentioned about the fact that a literature review is not a collection of citations. So you need to analyze and interpret what you're reading. Give your own interpretation and discuss the significance of those findings. So here you may identify research gap in theories, methodologies, and contexts. So these are, so when you read, you need to pay attention to actually the concept that talk to your topic, because remember in an article or in a dissertation, there are many things. So not necessarily everything is about that topic discussed there. So do not distract yourself with things that are not part of the topic that you are writing on. So that is where you can clearly see what is happening, and then you can give your interpretation. You can say what you think as well. So you need to avoid those saying, I think, for example, using the first person. So yeah, so you should avoid that. But then it should be clear that actually this is your opinion. Okay, so you remember when we talk about the context, we talk about the settings, the populations as well. So we mentioned about the time. So the population, was it younger people that were interviewed? Was it older people? in that, and then you, what are you doing? Now, what were the settings? The settings, let's say a study was conducted in West Africa. So now you are replicating it here in South Africa. So all these are part of your context. Then you also need to critically assess what you have read. Now, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the findings in the literature that you have read? You need to point that out. Very often, you will find that I mentioned somewhere about the use of those academic verbs, expressions, sometimes to show conflicts or agreement. So, and when you read in, you can find that, for example, you will find that they say, this one agrees, or this one disagrees, or this one contend this, or so this kind of words. This one agree or disagree. So what are the findings, conflicts in the debate? What questions are still unresolved in the field or topics? So again, remember when you write your problem statement. So these things are the one that you consider. So what do you see in the literature? So probably actually you have read that before writing your problem statement. Because if you did not read, then how would you have identified the gap, the conflict, or the debates that have been happening? Next, you need to synthesize what is known and what remains uncertain as well. So that is where your study comes in, as we were saying. So your problem statement was going to make that clear. Then your question, your objectives as well. Now, that is where the next point comes in. Connect that literature to your research objectives. So remember, you are still doing the proposal. So it's still not final, your research questions or objectives. So once you have finished your literature review, then that is when you will have a clear idea of what exactly your study is going to be. So you have things that you wrote down, but it's not that clear or final. So now you will see you're going to refine your research question based on the literature, and maybe you have found new hypotheses, or you're going to probably modify your objectives as well accordingly. Then you need to use this empirical review to inspire your conceptual framework that we mentioned earlier. So, as I was saying, your theoretical framework, which consists of all of these things we have spoken about so far. Now you have a clear idea on what you want to do. Now you need to sort of materialize that through a conceptual framework, generally in a form of graph, should I say. So I have put one example here from one of our students, just to show you. So sometimes you may find some authors do something like this, but it is a theoretical framework. So it's not a conceptual framework. So now you can also use that, for example, to inspire your own conceptual framework. So what is it about actually? So let's look at this example here. So this is about the corporate social responsibility in liquor retail for sustainable community development. So we've got here at the center, the liquor retailers, corporate social responsibility implementation. So now, what do they do in that to come to this outcome, which is the community development? So you have ethical business here, you have environmental, you have responsible sales, you have community. So each of these have got other things that support them. Now, how are you going to use this? Remember, you probably, if you are doing a quantitative research, somewhere if you are doing even qualitative, because in qualitative, you're not going to have a questionnaire as such. You may have SMI or structured or unstructured questionnaire. So you can still use that, but mainly if you're doing a literature review on a quantitative study. So these are going to help you in developing your questionnaire. So in the literature that you have read, that is where you build these things from. Then now they are going to help you to build your questionnaire. Now, you may read through the questionnaire that the past studies use in similar studies as well to inspire you if you're not very sure about the questions and if maybe you're also short of ideas. Now, there is an alternative, which is to use a questionnaire that is built by, somebody else, and that was used in a past study. But if you use that, now you can see here source. So generally the conceptual framework is yours. But then now, if it was inspired by somebody or by some studies, you took part of these from a past study, then you need to recognize that here. So same with the questionnaire. If you didn't build your questionnaire from your own work here, generally, as I said, this will give you a clear idea on what should be in your questionnaire. So these could be the main section of your questionnaire, and then these help you build the question within the sections. So if you use somebody's questionnaire, then you also need to say that. And that generally help you with the reliability and the validity of your study. So remember, these are the things that you're going to talk about, how you did or you ensured the reliability and the validity of your study. So generally they look at, or you look at the measuring tool that you use. Now, how reliable, how valid it is. So if it was used before in a study, then you can confidently say that because of that, so obviously you need to verify there that it is said that it was tested for validity and for reliability, and it was found to be reliable and valid. So then you can use that, but you can still add something like the reliability. You can still verify it yourself by, doing the test for the Cronbach alpha, for example. And that your statistician will help you with that. Okay. I think we almost done here. So we come to the conclusion. So remember again when I was doing the overview, I mentioned the fact that people do not conclude the chapter, which is quite weird. Maybe if you studied science, mathematics, and accountings and things, you were not, you're not that familiar with the writing and at a master's level, for example, but not at a PhD, because you have done that before for sure. So you should have a conclusion. And now, generally, what should be in your conclusion? So you need to summarize the main findings in your review, and then highlight the research gap that you found there, and that obviously your study is going to address. Again, it's not going to address all of them, but part of it. And then what are the implications for your research? So remember what I mentioned at the end of your literature review, you have now a clear idea of what is there and what is missing and what you want to do. So that is going to shape your methodology and your expected contribution and limitation as well. So then remember, in each study, there is at the end, there is, whether it's articles or it's a dissertation, there is always a recommendation section and the limitation. So where they say about, the future research should look at this and that. So you will do that as well, but then you can also, when you are reading your literature, the other people's work, always try to look at the end what the limitations and recommendations are there, so that it can help you with yours as well. Now, you also need to transition to the next session. So you need to announce, for example, what section is coming next and what is that section going to be about, just briefly, instead of just ending, we don't know what is next. And something I forgot to mention, actually, people don't write actually the title of the chapter. I've seen that even recently. So they just start writing. And so then what I write on top there, at the very top, what is the title of your chapter? So these, again, are the things that you need to really pay attention to. And one thing about the use of AI in the literature review. So it's something that you can use to help you, but you also need to be, how should I say that, meticulous enough, to avoid some mistakes that we can see very clearly. So when you often look at what you get from AI, that part of which you can use, but then it's not going to be a copy and paste. So it's things that you need to consider your context, again, very important. Then you need to adapt. So some of the things maybe that you leave there, but do not leave them exactly as you took them, because it's when you look at that, as I said, there is typical way of doing things by AI, whichever it is, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude AI, whatever it is. So when I look straight, I know that this is from AI, because actually they couldn't even do any change there. They just copy and paste it. So, and that is not going to help you with examiners. So during the review of your work, so you need to try and avoid that, and don't just go the very easy way. Yes, as we said, you can use those, but then you need to adapt them to your context, and then you need to do the proper work. not just copy and paste. And then remember, you're going to have the, how do you call it? Your reference list. So that is also where we can catch, we generally catch students when they use AI for most of the things, because there are tools that also mask that or hide that they use the AI. So your reference list need to adhere to the guidelines of the university, and they need to match what is inside your literature. So you should not have a citation in the literature body, and then you don't have it in the reference list, and vice versa. So sometimes student thinks that we don't check that. Very few reviewers check line by line, but they do random checks. And after looking at few, they can realize that actually something is wrong here. So I think that is it from me. So I will send you this if you want to, especially for master's student, if you want to have it as a guideline. Again, as I said, it's not like a rigid document, so you can use what you want from it. You can add, you can subtract, and yes. So, and then next week, we'll look at the most effective way to do the referencing as well in the text, and so that you can have your list of references correctly matching your body of the literature review or any chapter, by the way. All right, so I think that is enough from me. Now let's hear from you guys. So the floor is now open. Anybody wants to add something? Maybe Prof can start, because we see that,
Yes.
Yes, just
I
to
see
motivate people.
I see the cold is
Settling
getting to
in.
them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think thank you so much for your presentation. I think sure, every slide has got so many valuable points on it. I think one thing is avoid repeating, so that every paragraph starts the same, or that every sentence starts the same. It is challenging at the beginning, but Dr. Ismaila can attest, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more comfortable you become, and the easier you find ways of saying things differently. Also, I think it's important that you don't just list a number of sources in a paragraph. In other words, a lot of times you have a paragraph, it says source A says this, source B says this, source C says this. Then the next paragraph starts. Source A says this, source B says this. There's no arguments or message in the paragraphs. So it's not about filling up your pages with just a list of sources and sentences containing references. You have to, what they call, present arguments. So you have to argue. I don't know who of you watch TV where they have court cases where the lawyers argue a case. So every paragraph has to say something. It's not just a bunch of 6 sentences grouped together that forms a paragraph. You must tell a story, and you can have in a paragraph a number of sources that you use to say something. You can also in a paragraph have conflicting sources to show how wide the area or the thoughts are on a specific topic. But refrain from just trying to fill 20 pages with paragraphs, just listing a bunch of sources. Also, I think Dr. Ismaila is correct. Even I do mark external dissertations and thesis. You would start, and I mean, at the end of the day, if you've done a proposal or a dissertation, you might end up with 20 pages plus of just your references. Never mind the content. So as an examiner, you would, as I say, you would, for example, read the proposal and you'll actually tick. I usually print a reference list and then I would read and mark it off. And you very quickly pick up when someone is not accurate or there's stuff missing. And then the student starts losing credibility. Because then you as an examiner, this guy, so it's small technical things that you as a student are in charge. What the overall perception or what the overall opinion and mark the examiner gives is something. But the technical things you are in charge of, making sure your references correlate between text and your source. And this is why next week's class is very valuable. Using a reference manager makes it a lot easier than you doing it the manual way. Because when you take out a source from your text, it automatically updates your reference list. And I can guarantee you, I'll put 5 rand on the table, you will delete certain stuff in your work. You will add new stuff. That's just the nature of it. And a reference manager just takes care of so many of that small little technical things. So yeah, and I got a proposal from one of my students, and just from reading it, I mean, I didn't even use an AI checker. I did eventually, but just by reading it, you pick up that this thing was done by AI. Now, I'm not going to give away the secrets of what you pick, how you without even but there's certain cues that gives it away. And I've been saying from the start, use AI to assist you, but don't use AI to write your work for you. Okay, that's the big difference. You can prompt AI and use AI as much as you want, but write it in your own words. Let AI give you a summary. Let AI, on a certain concept, give you an overview and summarize it for you. Or if you want to know something, you ask it, but don't go and copy and paste from the AI into your work. Use AI as a tool to assist you. Don't use it as a tool to write it for you. Okay, so don't be it's just not, that's academic suicide. It's not, and again, listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're not allowed to use AI, but use it responsibly. And when you actually do use AI, I've even in an article I've presented at a conference, actually used AI, but I've referenced it and I clearly stated in the text that this portion was generated by AI and this was the prompt I use. So it's not to say you can't use AI in your work, but don't use it and then present it as your own. Okay, so that's something very specific or very important. But at the end of the day, literature review is a beast of its own unique challenges. You can write 5 pages on one day, and on the next day you can't write 2 sentences. That's just the nature of it. So don't try and do a literature. I'm gonna leave it for 2 weeks and I'm gonna hit this literature review. That usually doesn't work out like that. So a literature review, if you're not actually writing, look for sources, read, get more. A literature review, you're reviewing the literature. It's not it's not a list of literature that you are compiling. You are reviewing literature that you want to use in your study. So that review process also includes, when you're not writing, go and look for sources, read about the topic, make a note, find more literature on this topic, read about it. This thing can grow quite quickly, but it's a everyday task. And the more you do it, you'll see. Chapter 1, for those who masters, chapter 1 is a nightmare. Once chapter 1 is done, chapter 2 is less of a nightmare. By chapter 5, it's actually fairly easy to do. It's just because you get more into it, you get more used to it. Practice makes perfect. Okay, and if you get stuck, you have your supervisor or promoter, but you're always welcome to contact me. I'm sure Dr. Ismaila can also give a word of advice. But as I said previously, we don't give us your work to review and give you an opinion. That is between you and your supervisor. You can maybe, if you get stuck on something, ask a bit of clarity, but don't send us your whole thing to read and review. That's overstepping the boundaries, and it's between you and your supervisor. I cannot. If I give comments, that's from my perspective. I'm not involved with you and your supervisor from the start, so I'm not sure what has been discussed. So I might just give you some advice, and it's completely opposite to the goal that your supervisor is working towards. So we are available for advice, but we're not going to review your work and up to that level. I don't know. I saw a hand earlier. I'm not sure if Poliana. Go for it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and
Hello?
clear.
Okay, cool. I wanted to ask, because I'm doing a qualitative research, and so do we also do the conceptual framework?
Dr. Ismaila.
So remember what I said when I was there by the conceptual, and you may still have a conceptual framework, but for qualitative research, it's not that how should I say that important, but it will still guide you. So you may or may not do it, but if you're doing quantitative, it's very important to have that.
Thank you.
Okay, 100%. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so this
comment
or comments, yeah. So this session is recorded. It'll be available afterwards. Yeah, if you don't, and again, I think also make sure your chapter has got headings and that your numbers make sense. 1.1, 1.1.1, 1.2. I get a lot of time 1.1, 1.1.1, and then next of a sudden 1.3, and then some 2.1. So you have this jump of a small technical thing, but just check your document that your numbering actually makes sense. It sounds so simple, but I even get it in PhD dissertations that after it's been language edited, you still get an issue with numbering. And I'm of the opinion, and in my students, you're here to learn skills. Eventually, at the end of the day, I would want to get, pass on skills, because I would like you to supervise or promote students one day. And if you don't learn and know all the small technique and writing a proper document, then sorry, I don't know, the network dropped there. Okay, so small technical things you're in charge of, pay attention to it from day one. It'll save you a lot of time, But yeah, enjoy the journey. It's as I said, it's frustrating. Some days you can't find one word to write. Other days it just flows. Don't lose hope. If you get stuck, go walk around the block, go have coffee with friends, take a break, get your brain a bit fresh air, and then you come back. Okay, so it's just the nature of it. And yeah, thank you, Dr. Ismaila. If there's nothing else from you, then we'll see you all
yeah.
next week in the Zotero session. Dr.
Yeah, so
Ismaila, you
just
can
to
have last
yeah,
word, and then we
just
can say goodbye. Thank you.
okay, just to add something on what you said about the presentation of like the numbering of the sections, examiners get so annoyed by those small things because your work may not be very good because you're still learning somehow, but the technical things, those small things, they expect you to have them under control because it doesn't really take you much to learn how to do them. So I would advise you actually to Google and learn how to do the headings and the numbering. It's very simple. You learn it once and that is it. So from the start, you set your heading that you want to use, everything becomes automatic. So your figures, your tables, everything at the end, it comes straight out without any effort. So take some time to learn how to do it properly, then you're good for good. All right, so I think that is it from me as well. So thank you guys, and we will see you right back next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye, Doctor.
Bye.